Our podcast. All right, cool.
Well, it was happy until this morning.
It was very happy. For those of you listening at home, this was almost not going to happen today. But welcome to another episode of the Happy Hour podcast. I am your host, Ricky Valero. On today's episode, we are going to take a look at our redraft running back rankings. We're going to talk about a little bit of last night's Hall of Fame game. What we're looking forward to this week in the Hall of Fame inductions. We're going to break down some of our top 12 running backs, some disparities, underrated, overrated, overhyped. And then at the end of the show, we're going to give you a little bit of love in the movie world. As always, I am joined by my co-host here. Almost wasn't my co-host after his, strongly worded, despairing words towards the King Shark from the Suicide Squad. Mr. Matthew Fox, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing all right. I've adopted the new Jacob role. I'm
really upset because you were the guy that I thought that we could just really bond over film, and I'd say 9 out of 10 times we're almost in the same realm because even in the two films that we're going to talk about at the end of this episode, The Green Knight and The Jungle Cruise, we're on the same spectrum with those as well. So it's interesting. I don't know how to, describe it for you guys at home, but I will say this week's episode of the Music City Drive-In is going to be quite interesting because I've also formulated a super secret plan for how we're going to review movies on those shows now. So Matthew Fox doesn't even know, but none of anybody knows anything about it. So it'll be interesting. Make sure to check that out. We'll be back live. We haven't been live in almost a month and a half, I think, on the Music City Drive-In. So we're going to go ahead and we've been posting some interviews that we've all been doing. But without further ado, you're probably not here for the movie talk. So we're going to go ahead and dive into some football for you. Carson Wentz, the big news of the last week. Well, there's been a lot of big news. Rodgers is back. Wentz is hurt. Watson's going to be traded. He's not going to be traded. You know what I mean? It's, Joe Burrow, is he 100%? Is he 100%? You know what I mean? We've got a lot of things going on, which just really makes me mad because, to be honest with you, Matt, I really wanted to start doing a little segment here where I was like, these are the things that I like, the over and unders that I like. I was going to put a little segment in here because the season's coming up, but now I stopped doing my predictions for the year because I'm going to wait until we get about 3 weeks into August.
2 weeks from now. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's been brutal. The shifting sands, and even, hopefully we'll talk about when it either does or doesn't happen. But even with things like Watson, the big question, would they trade Hurts back to Houston? Because if not, then Hurts goes from a guy that some people think a QB1 to a guy that's not even going to see the field.
Yep.
But Carson Wentz one is brutal. I thought the Colts were going to have a tough start to the season. Their opening schedule, if you haven't looked, the first 5-6 weeks is brutal. I thought they were going to have a rough start and kind of have to sneak up into the playoffs. Now, if you're talking about me buying either Sam Ehlinger or Jacob Eason for 6 weeks, I'm sorry, Colts fans, you went from a 9 to 11 win range for me to probably a 6 to 8 win range.
Yeah, it's a big difference right now. So obviously there's so many, obviously, in the world of Twitter. We have fantasy football. We have doctors on Twitter. You know what I mean? So everybody has talked about what that's going to look like. And the crazy thing about it is whenever you're on Twitter, you get two sides of the spectrum. You have one that, I don't know if he's going to ever recover from this, blah, blah, blah. And then the other side of it, I think he might be back sooner, closer to the 5 weeks than the 12 weeks. So the 5 weeks we're looking at, let's just say he misses 3 or 4 games. I do think that they can find themselves involved because I like Jacob Eason. He's never going to be a consistent starter in the NFL. And the biggest thing is they should trade for this guy. They should trade. No, because they can't trade for these guys because if they come in and they win 4 games, all the money you spent for Wentz and all this, the draft capital, the only thing that's really positive about this for the Colts is they might sneak it in. Oh, wait, we went 2-2. Well, if he doesn't start this week, that'll be less than 75% at the end of the year. So then we only have to give up a second rounder to the Eagles. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like that in play. But for the Colts, it does hurt them. I had them winning the division. I did 100%. I felt like they were going to win the division. And all Wentz needed to do was play above average because they have a strong defense. They have a good run game. The receivers are where I'm questioning what's going on there. They have talent, but they don't have a one. They don't. So
yeah, I'll be surprised when we look at our top 48 next week if one or, I doubt there's two, but maybe one makes it in there.
It's funny because obviously I was like, man, what do I do with Jonathan Taylor? Does he go up and down? And we'll talk about him in a few minutes, obviously, with the rankings. But I was looking through. I was like, well, let me adjust my Colts receivers too because I think it trickles down. I was like, oh, crap. I don't have one in my top 48, I didn't think. So yeah. I think I did. I think I have one near the bottom of the 48. But
yeah,
it's kind of ugly.
Well, and so I think the big thing to watch as we get closer to the season, if we get to the end of August and they put Carson Wentz on PUP, then you know it's 6 weeks.
Yeah.
If they don't put him on PUP, they're hoping, whether it ends up being less than 6 weeks, they are hoping that they can get him in because that's where right now a lot of people get confused. The preseason PUP, you can come and go at will. It's once the regular season starts, if you're on the PUP list, it's an auto 6 weeks. Yep. So that'll be the kind of big marker. And for me, I'm with you. I don't really see the wisdom in making a huge trade if you think Wentz is the guy, if you're only going to have a couple weeks, especially somebody like a Foles. From the confidence standpoint for Carson Wentz, I think that would be a little brutal. That feels like why Philly let him.
So, yeah, exactly.
Something to consider if you are hoping Carson Wentz is going to be good for you.
Yeah, I agree with you 110% there. So with that being said, what I want to
Ricky
do
got
is –
so choked up, he froze.
Did I freeze? Okay. Are you there?
Yeah. Oh, did I freeze?
You froze on me, so it's all right.
Oh.
It's all right. All right. I don't know. It might be you. It might be me. It might be a little bit of both. But with that being said, go ahead and hit me with your 12 through 7 running back rankings.
12 through 7. So number 12 for me is Antonio Gibson of Washington. At 11, I have Austin Eckler. At 10, I have Joe Mixon for the Bengals. At 9, Ezekiel Elliott for the Cowboys. At 8, Aaron Jones for the Packers. At 7, Derrick Henry for the Titans.
I'm really upset and emotionally distraught by your Austin Eckler ranking, but we can talk about that in a minute. For me, I was looking at the rankings and I was like, wait a minute, I'm lining it up, realizing that the top chart, the top thing is 1. So I was like, why is he reading? Oh, that's not number 13. I got to start there. So
that's why I had to look. I had to remember. Well, and you'd think you'd remember, but for me, I'll just say, I have Najee Harris right there. That was Sophie's choice for me, not having Harris at 12.
Yeah, so I've got. I got David Montgomery at 12. There we go. I was going to make sure I was doing it right.
Yep.
I've got Montgomery at 12, Najee Harris at 11. My big shift in down was Jonathan Taylor. I have him at 10 now. Aaron Jones, 9. Ezekiel Elliott, 7.
8.
And then, I can't even get it right. And then I got Saquon Barkley at 7. Of your 7 through 10, which guy do you like the most and could see propel in that top 5 by the end of the year?
I mean, I think a typical answer is Zeke, who has a lot of talent and it's not high. But for me, it's probably Aaron Jones because we've seen Jones was RB2 and then RB5. I mean, with Rodgers, he's been there. We keep saying his touchdown production is going to fall off. It hasn't. It makes sense to me to have him at 8, but I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up top 5 again.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there as well. He's one guy that I like as well. I'm very iffy about Taylor. I don't know how I felt. The offensive lineman going down, that kind of hindered him a little bit as well. So I'm optimistic there. That's why I kind of bumped him down a little bit. I know you have him a little bit higher. I'll give you my 6 through 1 here.
For a minute, though, can we just reflect? Quentin Nelson is a hell of a teammate, breaking his foot the same way in solidarity with his quarterback. That's the guard that you need protecting your hiney.
Brilliant. I loved it. It was just fantastic. I loved every bit of it. It's like, that's icing on the cake. I support my quarterback. Nothing better than that one. Coming in at number 6 for me at the running back position, I got Nick Chubb. 5, I've got Austin Eckler. 3, I've got Alvin Kamara. I've got so that's 4 Alvin Kamara. 3, Christian McCaffrey. 2, Derrick Henry. And then 1, I've got Dalvin Cook. Give me your 6 through 1.
Yeah, so we have the same number 6, Nick Chubb. Great minds think alike. But then I have Saquon Barkley. I am worried he misses a little bit of time at the beginning of the season, but I still put him at 5 because I believe in the talent. Then I have Alvin Kamara. I have Jonathan Taylor at 3, and then I have Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey at number 1.
Yeah, so the big, obviously, disparity. My top 3 wavered. Even Kamara throwing in there. My top 5. I feel good about the top 5. I even feel good about top 6. Mm-hmm. Barkley, I'm in the same boat with you. I wasn't sure where to rank him. I still think at the end of the year he's probably going to be top 5 regardless. He's that good, and their team stinks. Their quarterback stinks. Sorry, I'm not a Jones guy, but I'm kind of a Jones guy, but I'm not a Jones guy. I've got a lot of Daniel Jones on my fantasy teams. I've been targeting him late. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me. But I don't have him as my quarterback, 2. I have him as a quarterback 3 on a lot of my rosters. But this top tier for me it's the cream of the crop. This is, for me personally, why I don't think you can do the whole 0 running back thing. No offense to the 0 running back crew. They're amazing. I love everybody that does it, to each its own. It's not my cup of tea. If I'm picking in the top 5, super flex, obviously we're dependent on other things. But if you're in a redraft league and you're picking in that top 5, you can get one of these good running backs, and I think you can be safe. You know what I mean? Like a Christian McCaffrey, a Kamara. I think Kamara is going to – I understand his stats weren't all that great with Taysom Hill at quarterback. Whoever's going to be quarterback, crazy Winston or Taysom, the running back Taysom Hill, whoever's playing quarterback, it's going to be interesting. But I think Kamara is going to eat no matter what. I know he struggled, but they're going to have to implement him in ways to get him the football, period, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's, for me, I feel pretty good about a top 12. Then there's the next 5 or 6 that I have at the top of RB2. If I have a piece dropping a little bit later today where I'll break down my top 48 and some thoughts that has a link to our ranking sheet so that you can go see my rankings, Ricky's rankings, and Timmy Reaver's rankings, one of our writers. If you don't have one of those guys, this is where I've kind of shifted with you on the 0 RB, having been a truther for a few years and having suffered the consequences. If you don't have one of those top kind of guys, you're going to have to pray for help. You're going to have to ball out in all 3 of your other positions to kind of overcome, I think, with the deficit, because there's too many committees now. There's too many question marks. Even with one of those top guys, you get an injury to your one guy and you're sunk.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot, Mr. Fox. Give me a guy outside your top 20 that you are thinking is underrated and or a sleeper heading into the draft.
I think so. I have Mike Davis at running back 22. I was impressed by his physical form, and last year we saw him fill in for McCaffrey and was a top 12 back. We were laughing on the round table because all 3 of us during the offseason said, man, if he gets a shot to be the guy somewhere, it's going to be wheels up. And then he gets a shot to be the guy in Atlanta, and I'm like, I don't know if I believe. It wouldn't shock me, though, to see him kind of come up. For me, I couldn't bring myself to put him in there, but we've seen him do it without crazy numbers in Carolina on a bad offense and a bad team last year.
Yeah, I have him 2 spots ahead at 20, but I have so much Mike Davis.
Yeah,
it's not even funny right now. Like I have a lot of Mike Davis.
He was a waiver wire wonder in Dynasty last year. He was one of those guys that if you did 0 RB and you were able to hammer the waivers, he and James Robinson kept your season alive.
For sure. And that to me is something that's very intriguing about him, because he does have the opportunity, and they have a new head coach out there that believes in running the football. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that they're going to pound the football. For me, man, this is hard. As you spoke about, outside that, top 12 range, it's kind of rough around the edges. And I really like Zach Moss a lot, man. I keep going back to that well, and I think it's crazy. And to be honest with you, I think that he has every opportunity to be that guy this year in Buffalo, and they're going to need a running game that is strong and dependent, and he can provide that. So Zach Moss is a guy for me that I can foresee being that in the near future. I think I lost Matthew here.
No, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. All right. So for me,
I'm taking it all in. I'm drinking it in.
I know he's just a guy that I like. I could be wrong, you know what I mean? But he's a guy that I've been targeting late as well. And I do think
I've been betting on him over Singletary too. I mean, I like where you're going with that.
Yeah.
There's a few of these running backs. Are their quarterback going to kill them? And that's if we're going to our guy that I worry about. I have too high. Mine's J.K. Dobbins because I like the talent and I like the potential, and I have him up I think I have him 17.
Mm-hmm.
But there's Lamar Jackson exists, Gus Edwards. They re-signed. They're going to have in there. Does he get stuck not being able to have receptions and touchdowns, which are the things for a PPR running back that you need to vault you up?
Yeah, I love Dobbins. I've loved Dobbins ever since he came out of school, but I hated the landing spot. Just because I know they're going to run the ball a lot, but them re-signing the Gus bus, that hurt. I think that hurt a lot. But for me personally, I agree with you there. The one guy that for me that's overhyped, man, this one's hard for me. I struggle with this one because I feel like there's certain guys that I'm staying away from. But my number one guy I'm staying away from is Antonio Gibson. It's not that I don't like the talent. I do, but I just can't foresee myself drafting him at his current value. And that's where I'm struggling. I don't see him as an RB1, so that's where he's going. And I've seen him go in that top 10 running back tier, and I just don't see it. He's not my guy. What about you?
I probably have a lot of Gibson shares because he was a guy I took later in drafts when that was still possible last year and returned such great value. I mean, he was RB13 last year. I have him at 12. I'm hoping that he stays around the same, takes a slight bump up, but it's definitely a risk.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, and I'll tell you what, I've done probably, I don't know how many drafts you've done, but I've done a lot of drafts this offseason, and this 20 to 30 to mark, because you got to think about it. Let's just say you're in a 12-team league, you start 2 running backs. I'm sorry, but there's not 24 consistently good running backs each week. There isn't. And I will preach that until I'm blue in the face, because once you get outside, in my opinion, once you get outside the top 15, even if you look at guys, I'm trying to see my rankings here, even if you got guys like Dobbins, Mike Davis is even a question mark. Javonte Williams, how much are they going to give Gordon? How long will it take for Williams to take over the role? And everything that you read out of camp, Gordon's still heavily involved in the running game. Chase Edmonds, what does that look like with James Conner? You know what I mean? Like even Zach Moss, I mentioned Zach Moss, but what does Zach Moss look like with Devin Singletary? And then of course the Buccaneers are a disaster of a running back. Like I wrote about that in my preview. You've got Ronald Jones, you got Fournette. Apparently Fournette struggling in camp catching the football. Vaughn is there, and then you have Giovanni Bernard that's going to be there. Like I think Bernard's probably the best of all of those guys. I think he's going to turn into James White. I think Bernard catches 40 balls this year, which is going to be very solid value of, in the late rounds.
For me, it's similar. Once you get, I kind of, you'll see when I do it, I broke tiers similar to how I started looking at quarterbacks. There's the top 5, and then there's my RB1s, and then there's the fringe ones, which was basically 13 to 18. But once you're past, I have Josh Jacobs at 19. Once you hit Josh Jacobs and go all the way to 60, I'm not confident, because even Josh Jacobs, he's kind of a plotter. He's done well because he's gotten a lot of volume. They brought in Kenyon Drake. Everyone assumes he's going to be the kind of Jalen Richard, I'm just going to catch the ball. Kenyon Drake ran for 955 yards and 10 touchdowns for the Cardinals last year. He was RB16, not being a pass catcher, but carrying the ball 239 times. That could end up being a much more even dreadful split. And then you're talking both those guys, you could end up at the end of the year, guys that are in low-end RB2 scoring for the year. There was 5 games that you felt good you started them. I feel like this is where we're going. It's just there's a handful of bell cows. There's a couple of guys that have bell cow potential, and then there's a whole lot of guys that are just going to be contributors.
Hence why I do not buy – and I think the RB, the no zero running back thing is year to year. It can be There will be years where it works and years it doesn't. This is – especially in redraft, we're highlighting redraft being there. This is not the year to be doing it because there's so many question marks regarding all of these. There's so many committees, and it's kind of come to that in fantasy football and in the NFL. It's kind of come to there's not a lot of one running back teams because even with like a guy like Jonathan Taylor, you have to be concerned of Marlon Mack coming back. Nakeem Hines is still there. Like they still have other guys. You know what I mean? Even with the Browns, you know what I mean? Once they kind of get down a little bit, they rely on Hunt because he's a better pass catcher. You know what I'm saying? Like there's guys in play. Not everybody's a Derrick Henry. And even Derrick Henry has a question mark. Do they throw the ball a little bit more this year? Does he, I still think
they definitely aren't throwing it to him.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So, there's a lot of question marks. I want one of those top guys. Give me the top guy every day of the week. And that's why I think Zeke is one guy that I've been targeting because I know that they throw the ball a lot, but he catches the football. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry. I understand everybody loves Troy Pollard and they want Pollard to get his opportunity. And maybe one day he will. But this is Zeke's team as a running back goes. And if Dak is just even slightly a little bit hurt, then they're going to have to rely on Zeke early and often. So,
yeah, and rumors of his death are greatly exaggerated. People forget their line was destroyed. We saw it when the only good thing that came out of the Hall of Fame game last night was the graphic that showed you their 3 best offensive linemen combined for, I think it was 10 games played last year combined. Exactly.
So people forget about it. And he still had a pretty decent season regardless. You know what I mean? And then, of course, Dak being gone. Andy Dalton he's terrible.
What do you mean? He's Chicago's savior.
Yes, he is. Yes, I don't even want to get started on it. If he starts more than one game this year, I think Chicago might blow things up. So, all right. Anything else on the running back situation before we transition to the movies and lose all of our fantasy football listeners?
No, just I'm with you. Running back, I want a good one. You really got to start moderating kind of in drafts. I think on the flip side, as we look at wide receiver next week, I've constantly been depressed that I can't squeeze 44 people up into my top 24 ranking. I think wide receiver is as deep as ever, and running back gets shallow early.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I don't mind fading some wide receivers early just because there is some guys in that. And there's guys in the 20 to 30 range that I love a whole lot.
That could explode.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And folks, before we transition over to the movie thing as well, I want to make sure that you guys are checking out all of the team previews that we're doing. We're dropping one a day between now and the NFL season. We'll be dropping some predictions towards as we inch closer to the season. Throughout the year, once the NFL season kicks off, I will be tackling some DFS talk on here and maybe a little bit of sports betting as well. Dropping some picks for you guys on each of these episodes. Last night, I played a little bit of DFS. I actually won a little bit of money last night on that just dreadful of a game. We didn't even talk about it. There's not a whole lot to talk about that game.
Okay, my one takeaway, Josh Dobbs looked better than either Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins, so those guys better get their S together.
Yeah, and that's not even that good because Josh Dobbs is not good at football either. So.
But I was I was catching up on it this morning going, oh my God. But I'm looking forward to doing our games of the week. And
yes,
the sheet that's going to be linked in today's article was linked last week. We will be putting our weekly rankings on there. If you look at that sheet, it's got space for all the way out to week 18. So we'll be putting weekly rankings. We'll touch on them here. We'll touch on games of the week. It's going to be very exciting as actual football gets back to us.
I agree 100%. All right. So football is done. Movies are in. The Green Knight thoughts. I'll kick this off. I have no issues kicking us off with the Green Knight thoughts. So Green Knight correlates with another film that we both have watched as well, Annette, right?
Yes.
Stylistically, stylistically it's beautiful, right? There's a lot of things to like. I do think that the difference between like an Annette and we can go, I don't really care. We can kind of go into a little bit more depth on Annette on a different
Annette releases in theaters today, so I think we're safe.
Yes. So with Annette, Adam Driver really gives a phenomenal performance. Dev Patel was good, but I didn't love it. What about you? Like, are you in that boat with me about Dev Patel in this? I like Dev Patel. I think he's a good actor.
I do too.
I didn't love him in this.
So I think the biggest thing to know, and it was funny in the hallway, I got caught by a coworker yesterday. He's like, "Hey, I got my ticket to the Green Knight. Did you see it?" And I'm like, "Sure did." It's like, "Did you love it?" And I'm like, "No." And so then we were talking about it this morning. Technically, I think it's brilliant. I thought the performances were good. The look is very good. It's a very fascinating take. I think the big thing to know if you're going to go into it is many people think it's going to be something like First Night or like Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, where you're going to get like this kind of period adventure piece. And this, David Lowery wanted to make something that was more of a metaphor for deeper meaning. I personally am not sure what I'm supposed to take away from Honor from this. There was also, I don't really want to mention it here, but there is one sequence between Dev Patel and Alicia Vikander that I will never forget. And also I was so grateful I didn't pick my wife to that movie. But that's, there was a lot of pieces of it that I liked. I just didn't really connect. I think that was one of the things, I didn't connect with the characters. I didn't connect to the story. And when that emotional component is missing for me, that's the difference between something getting like 3 stars, which I gave it, or going at 4 or 5 stars. I'd be curious yours. I gave that and Annette both 3 stars. If pressed to pick, I liked Annette better because the first hour of Annette, I was enraptured, and then it takes kind of a turn to Strangetown that I couldn't quite get on board with. But I actually was more into that one.
The first hour of Annette is some of the best piece of filmmaking this year. Like, it is. And the opening scene with Adam Driver is one of the best acted scenes of the year. It is, period. Like, it was phenomenal. So this is my thing, and I explained this on Twitter whenever somebody went on a 4-tweet rampage about how I missed the point went over my head, apparently, about me being emotionally connected to the Green Knight, right? I didn't feel that emotional attachment, okay? I needed to care about Dev Patel's journey. They didn't do anything to make me care about his journey. So the thing about this is the one guy was like, well, you should have read the poem. Well, the thing about it is movies based on books, movies based on comic books, movies based on poems, movie based on this table. I shouldn't have to read something to get emotionally attached to the film. They're 2 different sources of material, right? You know what I mean? It's 2 different pieces of the pie. Whether you read the book and you hated the movie, that's up to you. I can only compare it to what I saw. I saw the movie. And for me, I didn't feel any emotional attachment to anything that transpired in the Green Knight.
Yep.
I didn't care what was going on. I didn't care about his journey. And when this man is going on a journey to salvage his future or make somebody proud or stand up to all these people, why did I didn't care about that. So if you take that out of the film, then I'm left with nothing. So, but we could transition into something a little bit better here. A movie that was a whole lot of fun, that had some of the best and worst, I would say the worst dad jokes known to man, but they were funny because of the delivery. And I will coin this and say one of the most underrated actors in all of Hollywood, and that is The Jungle Cruise with The Rock and Emily Blunt. It was phenomenal. It was a blast.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. How long has it been, or have you ever been on the Jungle Cruise ride at Disneyland?
Yes, I have been, but it was so long ago.
The jokes that you're referring to verbatim are what they give you. The last time I was on the Jungle Cruise was January of 2020. The entire thing that he does on his tour, and most of those lines are verbatim what you get on the ride. I thought that was, and I find that charming and delightful. If you don't, you're going to be like, oh, I wish I was not on this. But for me, my biggest comparison is I love the 1999 version of The Mummy with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz. I thought tone-wise, story-wise, style-wise, very similar, and I had a ball.
Yeah, I had a blast with this. I mean, it's one of the most fun I had. I didn't get to see it in movies. I saw it at home. I saw the screener of it. I really wish I would have seen this in theaters. And I've strongly considered even going and seeing it in theaters just to kind of get the feel for it, which is a perfect transition because there's a lot of films in theaters right now. There's some, like, theaters are back and movies are back, and there's a lot of good things in there. I know that both of us can't I understand it's Suicide Squad week, which, obviously we both recommend checking out just because it's the Suicide Squad. The thing about that is, obviously, if you have HBO Max, if you want to save a few pennies and watch it at home and go check out something else, there's one movie that I know that we both did love. It's playing worldwide, but it's not playing in as many theaters as everything else is, but 9 Days. It's a breathtaking look in a way that we've never seen, in my opinion, and we've never seen before. We see films about life after death, but the idea of life before life, Edison O'Day's writing and direction. I saw this movie the end of last year, in October of last year, and I was anticipating it to be released wide for everybody to see. You saw advanced screener like I did too. Again, I resaw it again. I wrote another almost 700 words about it after I watched it for a second time. 9 Days is a beautiful film. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I reviewed it too. Mine dropped, I think it was on Monday. Mm-hmm. It's easily in my top 5. I think I have it at 3, if I recall. There was a minor shuffling. There's one we'll talk about the releases next week that drained me of my ocular fluid and flew to number 1 for me. So, but 9 Days, beautiful. Winston Duke, I agree with you. One of the best performances of the year. Incredibly profound, thought-provoking. It's definitely a life of the mind film. If you're looking for like some easy laughs or some action, that ain't it. This is one you need to sit and you need to think about life. Well, I think sometimes people go into movies. Winston Duke is a guy that's done some fun horror films. He's been in Black Panther. He has quite a bit of range. If you're thinking this is going to be kind of a commercial film, this is one that you need to go and sit with and let it wash over you.
It's a beautiful, breathtaking film that I can't rant and rave enough about. I've seen the movie 3 times now. I saw it twice in a 24-hour period. I actually saw this movie and The Father in 2 consecutive days while I was covering AFI Fest.
You must have been drained of ocular fluid as well.
And I was very much, because I watched both of those films twice in a 24-hour period. So I watched it between the 2 of them 4 times total. And I can't express enough how drained I was after watching those, because it takes a mental toll on you, because you do look within. And then while I'm looking within on one film, I'm looking at the end of, is this what's going to be the end of my life on the other side of it? So 2 very well-crafted films by first-time writers and directors, which is a nice, and 9 Days is a nice breath of fresh air in a world consumed with, the Suicide Squads of the world, stuff like that, So, and the movie's talking about Coda next week. We'll talk more about it, obviously, but it is a fantastic film. I didn't love it quite as much as Matthew Fox did, but it's still in my top 10. So it comes out next week on Apple TV Plus, so that's pretty awesome.
If you want to hear a ton more about Suicide Squad, join us on Sunday. 2 of us and Amanda, right?
I've got, I think
she'll be there to referee.
4 or 5 guests coming on actually to join us for the Suicide Squad adventure. Folks, make sure to head on over to Twitter. Give Matthew a follow at Nighthawk7734. Give myself a follow at Ricky Valero _ I can't even talk. I'm just done for the night, I guess, is what it is. Make sure to follow the show, FF Happy Hour Pod. Apparently somebody else came up with the happy hour idea later, but I figured the Fantasy Football Happy Hour Pod. This is week 2. Next week, we got the preseason kicking off in high gear. We've got wide receiver rankings, which I'm excited to talk about. We've got films that are going to come out next week that I'm very, very excited to talk about, including one that I'm really, really anticipating. That's Free Guy. I'm really, really anticipating that one because I've heard nothing but great things about that. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, we'll talk to you guys later.